Fossils are bones, and bones don't show colour. Right? Now, we're so used to seeing dinosaurs in a high variety of colours because, well, no one's wrong. Up until now, it was anyone's guess what colour a dinosaur was. But things change. The technology has come far enough that we can actually look at these dinosaurs in colour. So in this video, we're going to be speculating certain dinosaurs and what colour they could have been. We're going to be looking at how we might go about finding that out for definite, and we're also going to look at what dinosaurs we know the colour of as an actual fact. So make sure you stick around for all of that. And most organisms only leave behind the mineralised hard parts to fossilise, namely a skeleton, which doesn't really show us the skin colouring. Bit selfish if you ask me. But no animal is coloured a certain way by accident. They've evolved it for some sort of purpose, and it normally boils down to one of two reasons. To be seen, or not to be seen. Now, if an animal doesn't want to be seen, they'll normally adopt some sort of camouflage. Of course, camouflage isn't a one-size-fits-all. It depends on the habitat. But we can normally narrow down terrestrial camouflage down to earthy tones such as browns, greens and greys. Now, most dinosaurs were either predator or prey, so either way they'd want to avoid detection. So looking at the environment can help us loosely estimate what kind of colours or patterns that dinosaur had. So if it lived in a wide open plain, less patterns means that it blends into an environment with little contrast. On the other hand, a heavily forested area would require more patterns since there is more light variation. Now, one kind of pattern that we know for a fact that certain dinosaurs had is known as countershading. And I will get into how we know that later on. You would have seen this a lot before, where the underside of the animal is lighter than the top side. This gives the animal less contrast by cancelling out the shadows cast on the underside of the animal. Normally, the more open direct sunlight there is in an area, the more abrupt the countershading is. However, the problem we have is that there is one group that is quite famous for the opposite of camouflage. They want to be seen. And it just so happens that that group is directly descended from the group of animals that we're talking about. Birds are really famous for their displays, making estimating dinosaur colours the most difficult group of all. Now, these displays could be to either say,
"Back off, sunshine,"
or
"Come closer, darling."
Now, since birds likely inherited this approach, and the fact that we can see potential display structures on dinosaurs such as Triceratops or Stegosaurus, it makes things far more unpredictable. Thankfully, certain things can fossilise, such as melanosomes. Now, melanosomes are something that are integral to answering this question, since melanosomes are cells that give an animal its colour. Certain shapes that these cells take normally pertain to certain colours, and it was once thought that these cells fossilising was an impossibility, until they found it wasn't. Now, let's go through each dinosaur whose colour we know for a fact. The first of these dinosaurs is Psittacosaurus. Now, if you recognise that little beak of his, that'll be because he's actually a basal ceratopsian. And Psittacosaurus was from all over Asia during the early Cretaceous. One specimen, thought to have been illegally exported from China, was found with preserved skin and tail bristles. Now, this skin contained a wide distribution of fossilised melanosomes, which showed that Psittacosaurus was dark brown, with soft countershading on its belly. Now, this lower contrast countershading also matches its environment, which was a forested area with soft shadows that weren't in direct sunlight. Now, our next dinosaur on the list is Microraptor. Now, as you might have guessed from the name, This was a tiny dromaeosaur that was around the size of a crow. This little guy was found with feathers that actually gave it 4 wings that it could use to glide from tree to tree. Gotta be different, haven't you? Not only that, but the melanosomes in these feathers were an iridescent black. The next dino whose colour matching we can judge is Cai Hong, who wasn't keeping his iridescence quite as tastefully subtle. A small Paravian from the late Jurassic of, you guessed it,
China.
Cai Hong was actually small enough to sit in your hand and had melanosomes similar to Microraptor, except for the head and subtle hints on the tail, which show shapes more akin to bright iridescent feathers such as those found on hummingbirds, showing an iridescent black body and a very colourful head. You stay loud and proud, little guy. Now we have another interesting example next with Sinosauropteryx, where you don't actually need a microscope to see the patterns. In fact, this dinosaur was the first that paleontologists confidently stated the colour of before even getting it under a microscope. Sinosauropteryx was an early Cretaceous compsognathid from
China.
that was covered in filamentous feathers that would have resembled fur, showing an animal that was brown topside, beige underside, and had lemur-like rings going along its unusually long tail. But maybe you want to go a little bigger. Well, try this guy on for size. This is Borealopelta and is the famous mummified dinosaur. Borealopelta was a nodosaur, which is one of the 2 groups of ankylosaur, only lacking that signature tail club. This bulky boy actually had its armour, skin and internal organs preserved by a fast-acting sediment, as well as fossilising the melanosomes, which showed it to be a reddish brown with, again, counter shading. Now, as you saw, most of these dinosaurs were on the smaller side. Now, this is because, due to the nature of the fossilisation process, exceptional preservation becomes less and less likely. So finding melanosomes on a T-Rex or Triceratops is unlikely, but newer finds might narrow down speculation and, well, you never know. Until next time.